Okay, hello everybody. This is the EviGaro YouTube channel. We are here today to talk about something um, not SV for once. We are about to talk um, on Talonflame, which has been RUBL for quite a while, but their player base also has been pushing for a potential unban. So me and other lovely people, which will present themselves soon, are here to talk about the potential positives and negatives of doing such a thing. So, if you guys want to introduce yourself,
Okay,
okay,
sure. I'll
okay,
start. Hi, I'm eifo. I've played SMRU for many years, and I'm very much engaged with this tier. So I'm looking forward to discuss this.
Hello, I'm EviGaro. I'm former RUTL. I used to be RUTL during SM, so I played a lot of it. Played it in SPL and too. So yeah,
Hey, I'm Cyan. I'm not necessarily a name. Like I'm very passionate and very involved with Sun Moon Argue. I played it through like most of its lifetime from beta until the end, and I still follow the tier a lot. Not necessarily a name that you'll see in like big name team tours or in like tour finals, but I give my opinions on a lot of things. Like people, for more or less understand what I try to say when I try to say it. So just wanted to be here to give my opinion and such.
okay, cool. Um, so, first thing I think we should clarify is why there even is a talk to unban Talonflame. Like, why do people even want it freed in the tier, right? I think there's potentially a lot of reasons. I think the main one is that SMRU, when it comes to our old gens, is like one of the most actives that nowadays still tries to innovate, right? Like, it's probably one of the um, old gens that still has a lot of mainers dedicated to it and want to always try new Pokemon potentially that could be cool in the tier. So, in my opinion, a lot of people would like to have Talonflame in because they would uh, bring a change to the meta that could potentially um, like make for a better experience, right? And of all the Pokemons that are in RUBL, Talonflame is probably the one you could go for because, as we are gonna talk about, it has a lot of positives for the tier, potentially a lot of negatives, which we are gonna talk about as well. So there's probably a lot of interest to try it out. I don't know if you guys agree with me on this.
Right. Should we maybe talk a bit about RU World Cup 2022?
Yeah, sure, we can talk about that.
Yeah, because I think this is some important background information. So 2 years ago, during RU World Cup, we decided to conduct some form of experiment, where we basically we held two different SMRU slots. One was just regular SMRU, and in the other slot we had SMRU plus Talonflame. So we temporarily freed it during RU World Cup. Now, what this meant in practice was that we got about, I think it was right over 20 games in total with Talonflame, and then you have like roughly over 40 teams in total being brought. So we got some experience with Talonflame. And what we were thinking was that, okay, this is a mon which might not be broken. We ban it after a very short stint in the tier. Let us try to free it and see how it performs. Now, nothing ended up happening following RU World Cup, but it didn't seem to be incredibly broken during RU World Cup. And given that nothing happened and we're now looking at it again, the thing is, basically, the most people who were the most vocally against freeing Talonflame back then, most of those people either A, aren't opposed to it anymore, or B, they're not around anymore. And so that is the context for us bringing it up now.
yeah. I'll also add that a C to this, people just changed their mind because Talonflame was looked at by console. Like I think it was in 2019, 2019. It was looked at by console while when we looked at like 6 or 7 RUBL months, which ended with only Mega Sceptile coming back to the team. So Talonflame had some debate back then already, and I was pretty vocally against an unban because at that time SMRU was very different first, but was also like dominated by some fire types. Like Entei was just fairly recently banned. Salazar was still something that was really scary. So Talonflame to me just looked like a better version of that. Just with the ability to get a strong Z move with priority, if it get its health, the ability to break steel types as well. There wasn't a lot of things that like on paper at the time made it like super easy to check. But I do think it's very different now. Like Salazar isn't like the threat it was when the current gen was SM. Like not by a long shot. There are barely any fire type that get like a really dominant showing. But what you see a lot of is like Golisapa the teams, but and also more importantly for me, Mega Septal plus TO teams. And we could talk about Mega Septal in another video to be honest, because that's not busted as shit right now. But these comp are really hard to pressure. And Talonflame actually does pretty well against those. Right? And even then it doesn't do perfectly, so there's kind of a question there. Like, is it really that dominant? If even in a comp that seems to be really tailor made for it, it just doesn't do as well.
Right. I think something that's interesting was that when we freed it, what we saw that, so in theory, on preview, in any given replay, you could conjure up some potential set that would be very good into the opposing team. And so on preview, the people facing Talonflame would be like, this is a little bit scary. What if it is Gracium C and it snipes my Rapirior? What if it is SD Flyinium C and snipes my Slowbro after rocks or my Melodic from full? Or even like if Gale Wings is intact, then you can just nuke Aerodactyl with a +2 C move, which is priority. But then in practice, as it turns out, the SR weakness in particular is crippling, and it means that oftentimes, I mean, if you want Gale Wings to be active, then you're gonna need to remove rocks, and if you want it to operate, I mean, in general, just fine, you will need to remove rocks. And this puts a lot of pressure on the team because it means that you constantly have to keep this hash drop, which means that you have to send in usually your down fan to rapid spin. And I mean, firstly, if the opposing team has a Dilmise, then hey, you're gonna get spin blocked. Secondly, you're also wasting turns on spinning, whereas your opponent then gets to spend those turns to make progress of their own. And so in practice, Talonflame wasn't as overbearing offensively as we expected, and furthermore, um, it also doesn't necessarily perfectly synergize with the rest of the team because this Rock's weakness is just it's bad for the team in general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the main thing with
And
Gale Wings also, right, is that if you your best stabs on Talonflame are all recoil moves. So you pretty much don't have that many chances to actually keep Gale Wings intact, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I
And
think,
also like sorry, go ahead.
okay, I think the recoil factor is very important because if we look at like Talonflame stats, they are very bad. There's like only speed, which is impressive, and then everything else is either mediocre or below mediocre, right? So to do actual damage with Talonflame, you 100% need the Z move, and then you also need all of Brave Bird and Flare Blitz, right? You can't really run anything else.
Yeah, but also because I don't know if eifo remembers like SM beta, but a lot of the console actually at that time, when that was when Talonflame was banned, was very worried about acrobatics, no item. Like, because I remember Spirit, aka the Forbidden One, like laddering with it a lot and like 1v1 ning Gigalit like really easily. And that actually changed the opinion of the council at the time a lot. Like that set in particular, but that set like right now, I just don't see it because like you count from taunt and twist, and especially with Rhyperior being like super good. You really want Wisp
Yeah,
in this tier, so like it doesn't have all the tools. Like so you're very much like forced, quote unquote, to run SD to make progress, and then you end up in the situation that Eifo was talking about. Like, sure, it could have the right move, but that's not just factoring like for the person playing against Talonflame. That's the person playing with Talonflame too. Like, you need to make decisions in the builder, and they can be very awkward.
Yeah, and so during RU World Cup, what we saw was that, well, every single time an SD Talonflame was brought, with one exception, I used it once, and it could have won me the game, but I won without using it. Um, but then in the other games, it ran into Rhyperior, and what does it do when it runs into Rhyperior? It does nothing. What ended up happening was that it invited in the Rhyperior, which then got to set rocks, then got to kill other mons and make progress, and so on and so forth. So the SD Feisty set absolutely needs to just dodge right period, never run into it. It's also terrible into Gigalith, as mentioned, and it's also bad into like Ampharos Mega, but to be fair, that's a very niche mon. So the main issues are first and foremost Rhyperior and then Gigalith.
yeah,
And then, of course, what you end up doing is if you go with the SDC move on Talonflame, not only do you not get to make use of its useful defensive properties because you're using an offensive one, so you can't switch it into, let's say, Metagross, for instance, and punish it with a burn with Flame Body. And but you also you're wasting the C slot as well. So the opportunity cost of running a C move on a Talonflame is pretty damn big. And so, like, I think that's something that we didn't properly consider back when we banned it.
Honestly, I think the best set for it is Toxic Taunt. Like
Yeah.
that set seems really good in RU.
Well, okay. Hmm. So based on
yeah.
my experience from RU World Cup, I found out that, well, so in my opinion, I liked Wisp U-turn boost BB the most because
Yeah,
it was useful at switching into things, pivoting out again, and it could also burn stuff. Whereas
yeah.
something like Tauntox, I think that's good too, but I'm also wondering, like, is that actually better than a Tauntox Manibus?
Or Noivern, even.
Yeah,
Well, the thing is,
like, because
the
like,
But
thing
I
is,
think,
the thing is exactly right that you have the speed to actually beat Neuben and Badibas, right? Where
yeah,
most of the times you
like
can't count with other mons first, then Neuben and Mandibads, so you end up losing the 1v1, right? That's kind of how it works sometimes.
you,
yeah,
you
that's
also have a physical. You also have a physical stab fire move, which is actually better against steals. Like technically, yes, Mandibuzz and Norvern can do well versus like Registeel with Toxic, but it can be a little bit awkward. Like you need to get the turns right because Toss does a lot.
Yeah,
right. I mean, so if, for instance, you are, let's say, Rocky Helmet Noivern, then you must keep that Rocky Helmet in order to actually beat something like
Yeah,
Registeel 1v1. If you get knocked off, like, this is a very frequent occurrence in SMRU where somebody will let their Noivern get knocked off, and then Registeel will end up 1v1ing it, and because Noivern is supposed to beat it, like, the whole team crumbles.
yeah,
And I guess Ninetales will, sorry, Talonflame will be better in that sense because not only can you taunt it and wisp it or blitz it, um, but you also have Flame Body, which can burn it upon contact. And interesting, what we saw during RU World Cup was that Registeel usage actually fell significantly from like 20 something percent down to like between 10 and 15%, I think. Or no, it was 16. But nevertheless, like it fell a lot. So it seemed like people were discouraged by the presence of Talonflame.
mm.
by the way, Cyan, since we've been talking a lot, we didn't really give you a chance. If you wanna say something, go ahead.
Oh, I was actually going to speak up right then. I do think one thing to consider is that any RU World Cup, like we didn't really get it. It was a pretty short tour, like in all things considered, and it's kind of hard to really optimize building with a Pokemon in mind or building with a Pokemon when it comes to like very short stints in the tier. Like for example, Mega Sceptile when we unbanned it or when y'all unbanned it, I went on the council. Um, it wasn't really viewed like it wasn't viewed as being particularly strong, but that was partially because people weren't really like getting the most out of it. People were still using aerial ace, which is fucking garbage. People were still using like HP fire, like 4 attacks and stuff like that. Once we started to see the protect seed and sub seed sets, it gained in strength and it started to snowball to where Mega Sceptile is generally considered top two, if not the best mega in the tier at the moment in modern Sun and Moon. Whereas saying that back in the day would have been like crazy. Like, what? The Mega Stoiz is not the best? And so I think one of the things about Aria World Cup is that we didn't really have enough time to optimize how to build teams with Talonflame. It's a lot easier to build teams against Talonflame because its answers are really obvious. You put on a Rhyperior, you put on a Aerodactyl, you put on Gigalith, so on and so forth. You can even put on Slowbro and not really fear anything except like getting outplayed by +2 Fly Z. Um, but it's a lot harder to build with a mon with such a crippling weakness, and it's so frail and it's very difficult to play around, but it has a very high ceiling, kind of like Salazzle. So I feel like people didn't optimize. So the point about Registeel, I feel like in theory Registeel is actually a good partner for Talonflame, right? Because you have a lot of backup bulk and you have a lot of the main things that threaten Registeel are not necessarily going to click the moves that threaten Registeel into Talonflame. Like for example, if you're facing a Roserade, it's going to be less likely to click HP Fire or HP Ground because there's a Registeel sitting around. If you're facing a Fighting Titan, be disincentivized from clicking fighting moves into the Registeel because you might switch into the Talon and burn them and stuff of that nature. So I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we can think about as far as how to answer it and how it is healthy in the tier, or not necessarily healthy in the tier, but how it's answerable in the tier, how it's not broken. But when it comes to its health and like its actual presence, it takes a bit more time to develop that truly and to truly see like who are the real losers and winners of its presence in the tier.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a very good point. I think that's also part of the reason why we didn't end up acting on Talonflame back then. Like we gathered some data on Talonflame, but our experience was still very limited. And like just to illustrate, Sinus's point, at the end of that tournament, nobody brought Talonflame to semifinals or to finals. And at the time, I was building very actively, and I was also talking a lot with Cyanize about my builds. And we were like, I don't really feel comfortable using Talonflame. I feel like it would be more reliable to use something without Talonflame. So just to say that like we didn't really have it fully figured out at all. And I think it would take, well, not just one more tournament to find out. I think it would take several more tournaments to find out. Like we need way, way, way more battles to
Right.
truly see the
But
effects of Talonflame. And I also think it's right about Registeel. I think something that was even more suspicious in terms of usage was that Goliath Pod, I mean, it wouldn't be argued by usage if we go back and look at the stats from Talmeta. It only got like 4% usage, which seems off. Like, sure, Talonflame punishes first impression and leech life and potentially knockoff if it is a bulky flame body set. But then again, I mean, if Glycopod like liquidates it upon switch-in, then I mean, yeah, it literally gets liquidated, it drops. So like when I'm referring to RU World Cup, like keep in mind that I'm trying to just sort of like emphasize my point, but yeah, we should definitely be have some humility about those results and think that yeah, they're not like the gospel or anything.
Yeah, I think the problem with Talonflame especially is that like all the Pokemons with the Bilky set I'm talking about right here, with all the Pokemons you think you will be able to actually check with Talonflame, I'm pretty sure they all have one way or another an option to beat it. Like you will want it to you will want to send it on a physical attacker to activate Flame Body, right? But there's not really any good Pokemon that you can send it against. Like you can maybe predict Drain Punch Toxic Rock, but then it gang shots you and you die. You could maybe send it on Virizion, then it has Stone Edge, you die. Even stuff like Shamin could just adapt and start running HP Rock, right? Like it's not really reliable into anything.
Yeah, and also
Yeah,
keep in mind that, yeah, sorry, go on.
no, but like, but on that note, I think if you're considering sending Talonflame on these Pokemons anyway, it has to be the bulky set, right? Because if it's the Flygnum set, no, you really want to keep the potential a priority because that's what makes Talonflames on paper broken. Like it's the +2 Flygnum at like just owning like a Scarfer or something, and then like you don't really have enough a lot of countermeasure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, certainly. Although I genuinely think that if we were to unban it, I don't think SD would be the best set. I think
Yeah.
some form
Yeah,
of
me
U-turn
neither.
set will be better. Because like I mean, back when, so when we played RUEC, I mean, I didn't just play my matches. I also like I spent like 10 plus hours per week in the builder, just thinking, and then I also did a whole host of testing. And what I came to find was that like, I really wanted U-turn, almost always. I wanted U-turn, and I also wanted the ability to actually use it defensively. Because the thing about like offensive, let's say for instance, offensive SD Steel Wing flying MC. Sure, on paper this can break the bulky borders, and it can also even snipe Deoncy. But then in practice, you're going to end up just keeping this mon in the back. You're never going to be able to use it defensively at all. And also, you can't use it to pivot when it is inside. Say, for instance, that, okay, some stuff is still too healthy. So, sure, you can SD and you can blow the C, but you're not going to be able to grab the KO. Well, then you would love to be able to instead just U turn into another breaker and then go on the offensive. But if you have stealing or whatever, and instead, you can't do that. And so I think that some form of pivot set, be it with like helmet or even like it could still be running like Flyinium C but with bulk and flame body. But I feel like you really do want the ability to U-turn on stuff.
Yeah, I think Talonflame would eventually develop like current Noivern is right now, right? Where you would
Mm.
rather have more of a support set, or even just Z move, but still with like the bulk and support or whatever. Because I
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Hmm?
okay.
Go
Hmm.
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Hmm.
okay, yeah, we talked.
Who's going now?
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. You finish.
Yeah, finished it.
What were you gonna say?
Oh my god. Oh my god, she died.
Hmm? Huh? Hello?
Hello?
Am I too quiet? Can you not hear me?
No, no,
Yeah,
I can't. I thought it was Luna that was talking.
Oh, no. Yeah, I was just saying you could go ahead and finish. You would started saying something.
I think she's talking though because like her ring is
Oh, I see what you
I don't know. I
mean.
don't hear. I don't hear
oh,
her.
me neither.
Hmm. Unfortunate.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, that's not great.
Any,
I'm hearing some
anyway,
weird sounds.
oh, that's me. No, no, that's on me. Sorry.
Yeah, okay,
Anyway,
good.
you still hear them? This is very professional, by the way. Shout out everyone.
I mean, hey, such is life sometimes.
Anyway, uh, I just had something I considered while Luna tries to fix it. The one maybe worry I could have about like SD Talonflame actually doing something really stupid is if it brings back HO again. Because there was a point in SM where HO was really, really broken. That was mostly when Linoon was around. But I don't know if Talonflame like had something to this archetype that maybe could be too much. I think that's something that needs to be tested because again, you didn't have enough data in that one tour for how people would be able to create with it.
Yeah. So I think cyanize like hypothesized that it could potentially like worsen like the so-called Don Metapod core, that is to say, the core of Donphan, Metagross, and Glycopod, and that this core in general tends
Mm-hmm.
to hurt HO. And so by extension, if we free Talonflame, then by worsening the metapod, it should in turn improve hyperoffense. Now, this wasn't borne out by the data during RU World Cup, but again, the sample size was small, and the time frame within which this tour happened was also short. So it could potentially get better. But what I want to know then, like, is why would it make HO better? Like, can you please expand a bit on that?
Well, I think more
Um,
of not even just the fact that it makes like it pairs up well into Dawn Metapod, but even more so the fact that it is a good HO tool in of itself. Because if you can't use its defensive properties when you're using the SD fly, as he said, right, you can't use its defensive properties. You have to keep off rocks constantly. You don't really have much room to use pivot and use other breakers. Then the best situation to use such a thing would be hyper offense, where you just click buttons and spam into the opponent until you have something that can win, right? And so you pair it with stuff like in Dusk to soften up a slow bro, or you pair it with something like Cloister or like a Zydog, something of that nature. And I feel
yeah,
like it could be a good facilitator, but the problem is that it's so reliant on that Z move that you basically take away the option, because you really, really need that power, and you need the option to have that one non-recoil attack that doesn't, shut off your Gale Wing. Because the problem is, if you ever click Flare Blitz or click Brave Bird before using your Z move, you don't get the priority Z move, which is not the worst thing in the world, but takes away what makes Talon so training. And so, like, really needing that Z move is in itself a constraint, because you would really want it on something like Zygarde. You would really want it on something like Barbarical, to facilitate the power of these mons that they have at their peak. But you have to put it on Talon. But I think Talon speed and it having to be kind of like immediately answered can itself facilitate hyper offense, especially if you don't run into something like Rhyperior, or you run into like Gigalith Stoutland or something of that matter. You can definitely like brute force your way into some teams and make way for other like speed boosting breakers in the end game.
yeah, but I think like the best partner I can think of is Slurpuff
Yeah,
because like beat steel types can lure Rhyperior because Slurpuff doesn't really like Rhyperior. Drain Punch doesn't do that much at +6. So and that's a mon that doesn't need the Z move. So that's pretty much a perfect partner. And for why I think HO now instead of like before, SV really changed people's mind on HO. I feel it started a little bit during Gen 8, but it's really not that rare that you look at tours now. You see people they start the SV game with HO, and then they move back to other tiers, and they're still running HO. Like we all consider the Gen 8 RU like a really boring meta because it was always like Crobat, bulky teams with like toxic recovery images. But nowadays, you're half the time you will run into HO. So I think people are just a lot less afraid to use HO now, even when it's not that broken, as opposed to before, where it's like, okay, yeah, obviously Zainu was ridiculous, or Rain when we allowed it in earlier gens, that was ridiculous. So you would see it in tours. But nowadays, like you get a lot more popularity in the archetype. So I think Talonflame that can make people look at Slurpuff and be like, oh well, yeah, that's really good with Talonflame. So I think there's a possibility that you'll see a lot more of it than you would be able to like in 2019.
Uh, I will
Right.
right.
I
I will say, as someone that tried to make use of Slarpuff in RUPL, right? I did a ton of tests with it, and I will be honest, the Pokemon kinda sucks. Like, it's not about having a good partner for it. Slarpuff just really does not have in the tier any Pokemon it can set up on, right? Like most of the Pokemons you can set up on are water types which have Scald, so you still risk setting up on those. The problem with Larpaf is literally that, like you just can't set up on anything. I don't think having Talonflame Freed would help, and if anything, having Talonflame Freed is also like um, a nerf to HO itself, because then you have another answer for HO with Wings Talonflame, especially if you run it with Z. You just can pretty much revenge kill anything probably. So I'm not sure
Yeah, so I
it
think
would
I
revive a show that art.
yeah, so I think in practice what HO would do is that you would basically be running like Tyrantrum or Barbaracle or Aerodactyl um on every single
Yeah.
HO, and I think that would reasonably cover Talonflame, but Talonflame would still be very good versus it, to be sure. And it could definitely be useful for revenging Slurpuff.
You can lose like on rock too. Like that one's good in essence.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's good. I would say that
It is.
Lycanroc is usable, but it sees practically no usage, and that is for a good reason. It's because it provides nothing defensively while only being okay offensively.
Yeah, the problem
Yeah.
is that if you wanna use a rock type in this meta, I think it's because you especially want the defensive value of it. Like you have Rhyperior, you have Gigalith, even Tyrantrum. It's very bulky and as a rock type offers a lot of defensive value. I don't think Lycanroc likely cuts it because it's so frail. But it could get maybe popular if Talonflame is that good. I wouldn't like bet on it, but maybe.
Right.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
personally a fan of, well, I wouldn't say a fan of Lycanroc, but I do see the potential in it because especially, like SD Crunch and stuff, being able to break through Slowbro, but like as a dark type, you don't really struggle with Mandibuzz, or you don't really struggle with like you only really have a problem with like the bulkier fighters, which have become more rare in recent Sun and Moon. So I see a bit of value in Lycan, but yeah, I do agree that like the rock types, you kind of want the defensive value out of it. Like even Diancie, like you're mostly using it because it's a really good stop to Noivern. If you're using Rhyperior, you're want to sit on fire types and you want to use the like big bulk and the attack to throw around weight. But
Yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from. Although I think like my main gripe with it is how it really struggles into Donphan, for instance, and Donphan
Hmm.
is, let's be honest, going to be on every other team almost, or at the very least every third team. And so when you run into it, it's like it always falls short. Like sure, you have the priority which is useful, and sure, if you predict the Slowbro and SD as it comes in, then you can remove it. That's fine. But then also you have like Rhyperior, and it's like you can SD and you can go for Drill Run, and it's gonna eat that easily and it's gonna KO you in return. So I think like it's okay, especially if you pair it with mounts that appreciate these mounts being weakened. But then again, at the same time, it's like how many styles of teams this kind of mon fit on, and it's like, well, it's only really on offense, and especially on hyper offense, and that's not being used that much as of yet. Now, I do think that a Talonflame being introduced would increase the usage of Lycanroc, both because it would make, well, maybe it would make in HO better, but it would also increase the usage of Lycanroc because Lycanroc itself is a decent way of answering Talonflame for
Hmm.
more offensively inclined teams. And I think like so to the broader point, we've talked a bit about how HO would potentially get better, but I think another important question is, okay, suppose that HO gets better, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing?
mm, and that's actually something I wanted to bring up is that I personally am of the opinion that you can allow a multitude of play styles to be good. That's kind of why I harped on what I did in my post when I was talking about how every team is bulky balance versus bulky balance. You're often going to see Donphan plus Meta, Donphan plus Reggie, Donphan plus Galissapod plus Reggie, Donphan, Galissapod, Don Metapod, on every team. And it's even the teams that aren't using these, instead they're using, slower answers to these kind of things, like stuff like Mandibuzz and Slowbro and like Milo and Bronzong and stuff like that. I think it's a good thing to encourage playstyle diversity. I do think that there's like I mean, it's a subjective, kind of arbitrary tipping point where there's too much playstyle diversity and it's too hard to prep for everything. But I don't think Sun and Moon, I think Sun and Moon is too far in the other direction, a bit too far in the other direction. I think it's a great tier, but I think it's a little bit too far in the other direction where pretty much only have bulky balance and bulky offense to play for 90% of the games. Like you'll see extremely rarely you'll see stall, and then you'll sometimes see some like kind of offense like the Rabambi Webs team that I think it was either you and me or you and Rabbit or me and Rabbit worked on that was super popular in RUPL past couple of weeks. But I feel like it's a good thing if we have like the ability to more efficiently play a more offensive, more fast paced, like super trade heavy play style. because it's already a very Sun and Moon in general is very trade heavy. You they have the big Z moves. You want to just smash stuff and get stuff out of the way for your fat mon to win or for your fast mon to win. But I feel like in Sun and Moon Are You in particular, it's pretty much always you're just smacking two fat dudes against each other, right? It's never really like offensive trying to race to the finish type teams. And I think introducing more of those teams to the meta is a good thing just to, increase the playstyle diversity, increase, you know, possibly interest from people who don't really like the fact that this tier is only by bulky offense versus bulky offense. Because, I know a lot of people really adore Sun and Moon Are You, but I've also seen a lot of complaints that like, oh, whenever you see Sun and Moon Are You, it's just Registeel Mandibuzz, or whenever you see Sun and Moon Are You, it's just Donphan and Metagross everywhere, and and being able to expand that ability, that capability of the tier can help bring in more players, and even the act of the suspect itself, like the act of bringing in something to the tier, can help expand more people and bring more people in that may think differently, may build differently, may have certain different philosophies that they picked up from other places that weren't already, in the tier, and they're not the mainers and they're not the people who have been with the tier since its inception.
Evie,
She's
do you have
muted.
any thoughts?
She's muted. So,
Okay. Well then, you go on then.
uh, well, yeah, I think I pretty much agree with what.
Yeah, sorry, I just need a.
Oh, okay. No, okay, she isn't back. Okay. Yeah, I pretty much agree with what Cyan said. I think HO isn't necessarily in the bad spot. In a bad spot. I think uh, Pokemon's like the guard 10%, which fit super well in HO right now, are really underrated. Um, so I think HO you can definitely make like a good HO team even right now. But it's definitely true that um, SM argue in the way it works, right? First of all, we have Golisopod, which on its own solos most HOs. Then we have a lot of priorities in general that are very popular. We have like Donphan, we have Mega Sceptile, which on its own it's a super fast Pokemon that offense really struggles against. Then you have a lot of like super bulky Pokemon that you don't have like incredible nuke Pokemon that don't run Z that you can get easily passed by, right? So HO definitely has a lot of downsides. I don't think it's bad right now. I'm not sure if Talonflame would actually make it better. There's a chance it would, but even if it does, I don't really mind. I think meta diversity, even if it's by HO or like weather or whatever, as long as it's healthy and it's not like the main playstyle, I think it's always welcome. That's my opinion on this list.
Evie?
She's still muted, so you can say your own.
Yeah. Okay. Well then, I'll go on then. Yeah. So I have well, I have some differing opinions. So I think firstly, um, I don't think it. Well, I think it's true that most of the time you're either seeing bulky offense or balance. Because let's be honest, we're seeing a lot of Registeel Slowbro too. Although I should note that usually, or like the most used mon is oftentimes Flygon, just because it's such a good glue mon. And like if you go back and look at usage from like RUPL or RU World Cup or whatever from pretty much any year, you'll see that like the top mons are always it's Flygon and it's Registeel and then it's Glycopod and Donphan. And then you'll also see other stuff like Manibus and Skepelt sometimes high up, but not quite as high. And then Slowbro is also usually pretty high. And it is because these mons are very good glue mons. And personally, I really like it when a tier is centralized around good glue mons. Um, well, contingent on those good Glumons also having reliable answer encounters. And I think this describes the current SMRU. I think the current SMRU is very balanced, it's very competitive, but I also think it allows for very different forms of skill expression. Not only because you can take those solid cores and then use lots of different options in the last slots, like you mentioned, for instance, Celestial, sure, and you can also use like Ninetales. You can use well, Deontay is very good. You have all these very cool options that you can use in the final three slots. That's the first point. And then secondly, I also think what we see sometimes in team tours is that people will tend to use stuff that they are comfortable with and that they know will always perform well. And so what I think we tend to see is that usage stats for certain mons get inflated when it is no longer the main gen because people sort of stop experimenting. Now I think to be fair, people are still keeping it relatively fresh with respect to SMRU, but I think like the lack of stall usage and the lack of hyper offense usage, I think that is in part due to people lacking creativity and people wanting it to play it safe. And I think that in truth, both stall and hyper offense already have a place in the current SMRU tier. And so I don't necessarily think that it is desirable for those playstyles to get any better. Like um, it wouldn't necessarily mind them getting a lot better, but I would mind it if that ends up decentralizing the tier, and in turn making it more difficult to build like more solid general like bulky offense teams. Because I personally I absolutely love to play bulky offense versus bulky offense or bulky offense versus balance, and I love to have access to like good priority that keeps HO in check. And I absolutely despise playing in tiers that are dominated by HO. So while I think it will be fine to free Talonflame, I think so because I don't think it will make HO overbearing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, but that's why we want to test it, right? Like that's what we really should be moving towards because I do think, like you said, it's possible that it doesn't end up happening, but because I always feel like because this is a shame that ODR isn't here because I know ODR loved to play with a HO, which isn't really the style that many of us really use. But like stuff like Necrozma, for example, like always was a little bit to the edge. Um, and just adding something else can be a bit of a worry, but again, that's what the testing is for. So I do think that it shouldn't stop us from moving forward and seeing what's up with Talonflame. And and like Sian said way earlier, I do think that the mega septile example is why we should is a good example of why we should be careful because honestly, septile when it was tested, like no one really thought it was all that much. Like we were like, oh yeah, the best thing it can do is like be faster than God of War and Passimian, even with a scarf, which is useful for that tier. But like that's it. And now it's something that we really, really do not like because it kind of tears the tier structure a little bit apart. So yeah, we really do need to see more of Talonflame. But I think it's a good candidate to do that with.
Right. Can I just challenge you a bit on that? Because okay, so firstly, we got to give kudos to Rabbit, who early on saw that like Skepta was amazing. He said that from day one. And then secondly, I think personally, I don't mind Septile. I think having access to what is essentially a Scarfer without having to choice lock, I think that's so great. Like in terms of speed control, I think it gives you so many more options. And then on top of this, I mean, it would not have been fine if it was not for the fact that, well, our top mons are what? Well, Scarflygon, Glycopod, Ishar from Donphan. So we have all these various sources of priority, including also BP on Metagross, and also the option of running like U-turn on Manibus, which more people should be running because that allows you to come in on like lead sheet and then you can just U-turn out on the substitute. I think because we have access to these tools, I don't necessarily mind it. Like I do think it's annoying, but I think it is manageable.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, this isn't just a setup video, but I don't really think it works all that well in practice because, yeah, like Donphan obviously makes it harder for it to revenge. But I don't think Donphan is all that great in SM. Like, obviously, it's a really good mod, but you're never gonna have to use your Septile for Donphan. And obviously, you're never switching Donphan into Septile.
Well, no,
So,
sure, but like, yeah, go on.
yeah, but Metagross, I mean, I always found Metagross a bit of a poor answers anyway, because Bullet Punch, obviously, you kind of need Choice Band for it to really do damage. Or otherwise, if it's leftover or berry, it doesn't really do enough. So, and without the recovery, Leech Seed just owns Metagross, and obviously Scarf is useless versus a Sceptile.
Yeah,
Mandibuzz,
you
I
know,
think
sure.
Mandibuzz is one of the best. I think Mandibuzz is one of the best, but in practice, it's really weird to see a U-turn Mandibuzz do all that well because Mandibuzz always has to do 10 different things. And check-in Sceptile is usually the one it doesn't really like because it needs to remove rocks often, not always, but it's really awkward to pair it with
Yeah,
something like Blastoise because then you open Raikou weakness and stuff like that. So
right.
yeah, I don't.
And this is why the best partner to Manibus is Donphan, or
Yeah,
alternatively, Dhelmise. Because Manibus is bad at defogging, and defogging in general is a bad move. Thank you to Cyanize for making me realize this.
Oh yeah, Talonflame.
And
Defog Talonflame would be awful, 100%. It doesn't beat any. It doesn't beat any of the rockers.
yeah, yeah, no, no, no. So
oh
yeah,
no,
no.
that would be terrible.
Yeah, I mean, like the only thing that's a bit annoying to me is that I've been running into a lot of Dhelmises lately with my Donphan, and that really sucks. Because then you end up like taking rocks with your rocks weeks, and you can't spin. And like even if you speed creep it, like knockoff doesn't do too much. But that's a whole another issue, and I don't think Dhelmise is actually unhealthy. It's just annoying. But I think in general, I absolutely love both Donphan and Golisopod. I think they are such beautiful presences, and the fact that the tier is centralized around these monsters that have solid checks and counters, but that also themselves are extremely flexible and that they can check so much on their own, not least through their priority and also having access to like a decent spinner. I think that is super valuable, and I think that it's important that any given change that happens doesn't like make this core fall apart. I think it's fine if it gets nerfed a bit, but if it were to become like way worse and we end up in a spot where suddenly like our main spinner isn't anywhere near as good anymore, or if our like best priority user is way worse, then I think that could be awkward.
Um, the way I see it though is that like if we free Talonflame and then like Hazard's removal gets worse because Donphan gets worse or whatever, then Talonflame gets worse as well because now you don't have that good of options to remove stealth rocks, right? So it kind of goes on a circle. It kind of goes on a cycle, right? Where
Yep.
well, spinners aren't good, so Talonflame now isn't good. Well, Talonflame isn't good, so now spinners are good. So I don't think like the spinners will get that worse. And also, like uh, the way Talonflame checks Donphan Isopod, the way I see it, is that you have Flame Body, right? Like you have to rely on luck to actually being able to check both Donphan and Golisopod. Because even Donphan could just like start running a rock move if you really want to, but if you just go knock off Ice Shard and rocks are up, you beat Talonflame, right? Even with max HP. I calculated that a day ago just to see the interaction, and you win that one. Golisopod obviously also has water move, so like
Yeah.
the thing with Talonflame is that in theory and with luck, you will be able to handle Regidompod or whatever, but it, as I said, relies on luck, and it's all very much in theory. I don't think in practice it would um, play out well for the Talonflame user, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think in practice it is contingent on how it is played. I mean, first of all, like SR needs to be off the field for this to even be relevant because you're not switching this thing in on rocks. And then secondly, I think well, you will find yourself if rocks are off that you might be able to sneak it in on, let's say, a first impression or a knockoff, and then that could indeed punish it. But at the same time, I mean, this is also like a form of like skill expression, I think. So I don't really see that as a negative thing necessarily. Um, and I also do think that well, to your point about like spinners getting worse, I think yeah, that's also like a great point, and it is really a part of why uh I think it wouldn't change too much. I think the main things that it would change is first of all we would see more rock types being used, most notably Rhyperior, but also Diancie. And then some more Slowbro usage I think, but Slowbro is already used a lot. And then I think we would see more of rock type coverage. So I think Virizion, for instance, which frequently just runs stabs, because it wants to have access to synthesis for recovery. I think it would be running rock coverage way more often, and I think also like Donphan, Flygon would be running rock coverage way more often. Even something like Passimian could also be running rock coverage. Although to be fair, like it choice band a gunk shot basically nukes Talonflame anyway, even if it's defensive, so it doesn't need to. And then finally, I think that Metagross would also be running like Electrium Z, for instance. I think it would be running that even more often, which is a set that's already good, right? Like it already is good for luring like Blastoise and for luring Slowbro that are the main medium Meteor switch-ins. So I think in practice it wouldn't change that much. It would just slightly alter some of our building choices. But I think the things that are good right now would still be good.
I think if Talonflame gets freed, Blastoise skyrockets, like or at least and becomes a lot better as an option. Whereas here you don't really see it all that much because people would like to use Septal with their balance like Regidon pod team. But Blastoise like is really the best partner we have for Talonflame. Like not just spin, but an ability to break everything that checks Talonflame. I think that's and it's something that would really appreciate something like Virizion not running synthesis because then it makes its ability to break a lot better, and it pretty much wrecks all the spin blockers we have. So obviously we want spin with Talonflame. So that's another aspect that would be really really good.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm, well,
Yeah, that was a really great point.
I'm not. I'm not sure what else is there to add. Like, we could argue what Pokemon would potentially get better in a Talonflame meta. Like, I think Mega Ampharos already is kind of underrated. I don't think it's like amazing or anything. I think it's good. In a Talonflame meta, it will 100% get better because that's a Pokemon you just get on for free and can click Discharge, get a Para or something, right? Of course, the ground type out, click Dragon Pulse, and then you do Alf. Um, but other than that, I'm not really sure what else gets better. Obviously, rock types will get better, but I think rock types are already in an amazing spot right now. So even having Talonflame doesn't really change that much. Um, like I'm just scrolling down right now, right? As Cavalier, I guess it could get worse.
I, I think Raikou gets better, or at least a little bit. But again, that depends on what the Talonflame does. Like if it clicks Wisp or like Gracium for some reason, then it's really good because Raikou hates Rhyperior. Like it's the main reason why this mod kind of sucks right now. So that's useful. But yeah,
Right.
aside from that,
I don't really agree that it sucks though. So prior to RUPL, I, I was playing a lot with like Chinese users, and I kept running Raikou all the time, and it was actually very annoying. Because I mean, first of all, you can run Calm Mind or Pummeling, and you can toss the Rhyperior. Secondly, you also have like the tried and true like Raikou plus T spikes, and then usually they'll Misei to spin block Donphan, which is also super annoying to run into, like Calm Mind, T Bolt, HPI's Protect, and then you have
yeah, that's a
basically you better have a registeel, and if you don't, then yeah, things are going to get tough. So I think already now Raikou is pretty good, but I do agree that both offensively and defensively, Raikou would get better by the addition of Talonflame.
Oh yeah, for sure. I do like all pummeling. I just don't like how it makes you slower than Virizion, which is always the thing that makes it super awkward in SM.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
again, if Virizion runs Stone Edge, that's another point for Raikou
Yeah,
because now it's a lot easier to chip.
yeah. It's either not Swordens or not Sympathies, and without
Oh,
either
oh
of the
my
options, Virizion is way less scarier, in my opinion.
girl, if someone like on my team proposes no SD Virizion, I'm subbing them out. Like no offense, but no.
I think like
Cyanize. This is your cue to propose life orb synthesis pretty attacks
Yes,
Virizion.
yes. Life Orb Synth is good, dog. Look.
maybe.
I
Oh my god.
I don't think running SD with or running like dropping SD if you don't have life orb is good. Like you can't do bear, you can't do non SDZ, you can't do any of that shit. You need the life orb power. But I am an advocate of life orb synth because it has just enough power to work. Like it still is relatively threatening. A lot of the times you don't super need to click SD when you're using life orb Briz. And I know, generally with SD you tend to um um lean towards Z sets because you really want the big fight Z nuke, or you really want the Roxy to, Oko Galis on the switch in and Oko Neuburn on the switch in and all that stuff. But with Life Orb, you have enough power to just click and chip things and be a actual reasonable threat while keeping the longevity that is useful for Riz and switching into stuff like Zygarde, switching into Blastoise. So I personally am a fan of Life Orb Synth 3 attacks, but you need Life Orb. Do not use no SD without Life Orb because that shit is ass and weak. Um, the other thing I was going to say about Bariz is that Talon coming into the tier, I don't really think necessitates Stone Edge. Like, yeah, obviously it's nice to hit Talon, but we already have Sigilif that it can't hit without Edge. We already have Noivern that it can't really hit without Edge. We already have Zatu that it can't really hit without Edge, and all of these Mons
Yeah,
are
I also
conjured.
I also calced
So,
and right like if you add Z move on Talonflame with rocks with like max HP, it's actually a roll to kill. So like
right, yeah,
it's not even unreliable as well, even to no Stone Edge.
right. Yeah, and that's something actually I mentioned in my post. Like, if rocks are up and Talonflame lands on rocks and you just raw click fighting Z into it, both CM or SD, like it just dies, which is not something that happens with Sigi or Zatu or Noivern. So if anything, Talon is not as good um into Veriz as these other mons simply because of the rocks weakness, and that's what really really sticks to me about this one mon is like being weak to rock type rockers like Ripe and Gigalith and Diancie and such, and also being extremely weak to rocks is just really hard to manage in a tier like Sun Moon Are You, where our hazard control is not really like super all encompassing and super like reliable. Like, oh, well, I would say mons like Donphan and Megastories are decently reliable, but you can easily chip through them. You can, make your way through them, or you can abuse them. Like, for example, the Rest Talk Scald Blastoise set can be abused by stuff like Sceptile and Roserade, or like Rest Del Beast can be abused as well when you force it into rest turns. And so all of our hazard control is not like all encompassing. It's definitely not as strong and centralized as it was in, say, Oris RE, where you just slap on a Flygon and it just works. And so it makes Talon really hard to work with because you either have to just go pedal to the metal, just click buttons and lead Talonflame before they even get up a chance to get hazards, which may not even work in your favor, or you have to basically like you have to play really like careful and whatever with your hazard control choices, because if you run into the wrong matchup, if you run into the wrong Pokemon, if you let rocks get up at the wrong time, it basically just it completely disables this mon because it's too frail to switch in on anything with rocks up.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I actually do need to go. So sorry, but good talk, everyone, and
No, no
go
worries.
SMRU. Woo.
Thank you.
Woo.
Uh,
Okay, bye.
bye bye. Thank you for joining.
Goodbye.
But with
But I noticed.
Evie gone, we did gain ODR. Hello, ODR.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, I'm here.
1 hour late, but still here. since
Yeah,
we since we talked so much, you can kinda go freestyle on like your opinions on Talonflame, and we will maybe comment later. So feel free to say whatever you want, really.
okay. Yeah, I guess I missed most of the discussions. I don't really know what you guys already talked about, but I'd really like to see Talonflame join. I think it's going to be a pretty huge shakeup for the meta if it does end up, getting unbanned. I'd really like to see it. I guess like the biggest impact it would have is that it is like really good into like, Metagross, Golisopod, Donphan teams. I think like Flame Body is going to be like easily the most popular ability on it. Like I don't really think you'll see Gale Wings except on like maybe like really balls to the wall hyper offense teams that are just gonna be running like SDZ move or something. But yeah, I think Flame Body is gonna be like a huge part impact on the meta because like there's really no viable Flame Body mons. So I think that's gonna be kind of its main niche is kind of just running. I don't know if it would really run like defensive sets. I feel like it kind of would honestly because Donphan doesn't really run a move to hit it besides knockoff, and I guess it EQ you on the roost. But yeah, I feel like it would spread status. Like you'd run Wisp or Toxic. You'd obviously have to pair it with good hazard removal because it's 4 times weak to rocks. Um, but yeah, I think that Flame Body is going to be like super annoying for those three specifically. Also, like Flygon doesn't really run a rock move, so it can't just spam U-turn every time it comes in. Same with like Passimian. It's going to be scared to click anything other than Rock Slide. So I think it's just having it on the team is going to really deter a lot of mons from clicking physical attacks that aren't going to we're going to one shot it or give themselves a potential to burn themselves. I think that's going to be kind of its biggest role. I think SD sets are going to be pretty scary as well, but it doesn't really have a good way. Well, I guess it can run like I'm pretty sure it gets natural gift, so you can run like
Uh,
natural gift
yeah,
grass
it
to
does
get
have
past
natural gift.
Diancie and Rhyperior. Yeah, I think that would be pretty cool. I'd like to see that. I think that's what it would actually run instead of Z move if it's gonna run like SD, because I think natural gift grass would be like pretty cool. Get past Rhyperior, Diancie, Slowbro type stuff. Milotic too. Yeah, and I guess that's kind of my initial thoughts on it. I'd really like to see it drop, but yeah, it would definitely be a pretty big shakeup.
Yeah, we kind of agreed on this, right? Like that Flame Body is 100% the main selling point of Talonflame right now. We kind of talked about this. Evo mentioned that he thinks like introducing Flame Body still kind of like keeps some sort of skill, right? Because Talonflame does have Flame Body and does punish stuff like U-turn, right? But a lot of Pokemon that you will punish that run U-turn also have access to very good coverage moves, especially Rock. Like Flygon can easily just start running Stone Edge. Passimian does already run Rock Slide, but now with Luffy Talonflame it would be an even more solid choice. So, like the Talonflame user doesn't have it for free, is kind of the point. So you will still have to like play well, play around like rocks and stuff. So even if Flame Body is a cheap ability, I think in this tier it wouldn't be as cheap. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that, but like I think just having the Talonflame in the back, like obviously you would be, terrified to switch it into a rock move and get O code, but just having it in the back is going to, make your opponent be wary of clicking, U-turn. You're probably not going to get U-turned on a lot, or like I said, Basimian clicking CC, Donphan clicking knock. Although it would probably still want to knock off your item. But yeah, it's Metagross is not going to want to click anything besides Toxic, or I guess I think it gets some sort of rock move. I'm sure it does,
It does
Yeah,
have
but
rock.
yeah, it
I
does.
don't know if it would actually run it. Like it doesn't really sound all
I
that bad. It'd
think
probably just want
I
to
think
toxic it.
I think it will just stick to like the Thunder Punch Electrum Z that already get used. I don't think you would really run rock coverage if you really want to hit Talonflame.
Yeah, yeah, I agree
Oh,
with
it
Yeah,
that.
doesn't get it doesn't get
I think
Stone
we
Edge.
could
That's what it.
potentially also see an increase in usage in explosion, but I don't think it would be like a drastic increase, but just maybe a slight increase, right?
I don't know. I feel like a general just like bulky offense team is probably still not going to run explosion, and like
Yeah, sure.
offense, like hyper offense would run it, and
Yeah.
I think it's already fairly common on hyper offense teams. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, you might see a little bit more.
Yeah, I feel like well on hyper offense it's basically either it's going to be explosion or it's going to be a Z move. But yeah, so I think it's interesting because then I don't think we have like a single person here who's actually like very anti freeing this mon. Do you
Right.
well so actually well do you remember who was the most anti freeing Talonflame from way back when?
No, I wasn't around for like when SM was a current gen actually. Like I kind of picked up RU like pretty much right at the end of Sun and Moon. So like that the last summer of Sun and Moon was when I joined like the RU Open then, and that was like my first RU tour, and I only got to play SM for like those few months before SS came out. So I wasn't around when like the discussion for unbanning stuff like that was up. So I really couldn't speak on that.
Yeah, I know, but I know that you played in RU World Cup 2022, right?
Oh yeah. I think I played in that. I probably did.
Yeah, okay. Because I'm like, I thought you were one of the persons who were like against freeing Talonflame back in 2022, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
If that was the tour where it got freed, or was that like a RUWC where it got freed? I definitely I
Yeah.
didn't play one of those tours. I didn't end up playing whatever tour it got freed in.
Oh, okay, I see. Never mind then. Yeah, I'm probably just conflating you with like Ashna. I think.
Yeah, maybe. I was pretty inactive around that time. I think I
Mm,
took that year off of playing tours.
I see. So then basically, it seems like we're all in agreement that Flame Body would probably be the main set. It's going to be running Wisp Boost all the time. U-turn is very good. C moves are also going to be viable, but perhaps not as common. And all things considered, well, I don't think it's going to shake up that meta all that much. But do you think that it's going to be like a huge change? Because you mentioned that, so I'm kind of wondering why.
It really just it would change just having the Talonflame on the team would change how you play like your offense mons. Like Golisopod would really not want to click first impression ever in fear of doing no damage and getting burned and being useless for the rest of the game. Same with like Metagross clicking mash. It would basically just scare a lot of opponents into clicking those moves. Like U-turn as well from Flygon. It would just force people to play a different way. Is basically what I'm getting at.
And do you think this will be positive?
It's hard to say if it'd be positive. It would be different. I'd really have to like play the meta with Talonflame. Like I said, I didn't play back when they had the experimental tournament where it was freed, so I kind of missed out on that. So I'm really just kind of speaking from like theory and not experience. I didn't get to play. Well, I guess it wasn't free for very long back when SM was current gem either. I think it got banned fairly quick, is from what I read.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm pretty much just speaking from theory. But yeah, a lot of mons would not want to click U-turn or any sort of resisted move into it for fear of getting burned. And there are a lot of physical attackers in the meta that currently don't really run coverage to hit Talonflame. So it would just change up sets and how you would prepare for it and how you would play in the game. So I think it would be a fairly big shakeup just because introducing Flame Body into the meta game is I think pretty significant.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to speak on about that is that I feel like this is all the more reason to want to free it because personally I'm of the opinion that when it comes to like old gen low tiers, old gens in general, people should be more receptive to trying things out, even if it changes in a way that's not necessarily favorable. If there's enough support behind, people should put more support behind changing things up and trying things new because it's less of like don't fix what's not broken and more of like variety is the spice of life. Like you want to try and figure out new things. Maybe new people are attracted to the tier. Maybe this is a positive change, maybe this is a negative change. But if you have that support behind and you have that initial momentum behind starting it, you can have the momentum behind finishing. All the same people that are there that were interested in, okay, let's try this out, let's see how it pans out, will be the same people that'll be there to be like, hey, turn this back to how it was before. I didn't like this at all. So there, you're gonna still have that same activity. You're gonna still have that same momentum and have that ball rolling. So I feel like when it comes to these sorts of things, it's better to just go ahead and do it and try it out, and then deal with the repercussions later, whether good or bad, and have the people that had the momentum, had the ability, and the motivation to start it to end it if it needs to be ended, or if not, you just have a good new addition to the meta, and you have more ways to play, more ways to build, more ways to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I'd say I agree with that. I'm all for changing, old gen lower tiers and trying new stuff. I was on tiering council for a few years. This was in SS though, but my kind of general philosophy was I was always going for a ban list that's as small as possible. So I believe, if something isn't worthy of being banned, it should be free in the tier. And I'm willing to, try stuff out and see if it really is broken, especially, those mons that were banned when the metagame was different. So I'm all for trying stuff and seeing if stuff is, actually broken, if it would actually fit into the meta. If we do drop it down and end up does being, too much of a presence or, warping the metagame too much, you can always just, go back, undo what you did,
Yeah.
reban it. So yeah, that's just kind of my general philosophy. I'd like to see the ban list as small as possible and be as inclusive as a tier as possible.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that philosophy, honestly. Like, there are a lot of Pokemons in our UBL I would also give a chance to that a lot of people call me insane for. Like, I would love to try Stakataka. A lot of people are gonna call me insane for that. I don't care. I would love to. But yeah, I agree with you. Well,
Yeah, I think this is really like the main shift that we've seen. So if we go back 2 years, like there were a lot of people saying the same things as you, and then there was also like a sizable chunk of people who were basically just saying, okay, what we have here is SMRU. It's a great tier. It's balanced. It's fun. It's competitive. It's probably the best RU tier that we have. And so really, there's no reason to try to change anything up, because well, in so doing, we risk making this tier, which is already very good, uh, into a not quite as good tier. Whereas now it seems like the tide has changed. It seems like more people are well have instead well either they have quit or they have changed and then they're more like, well, hey, I mean, we might as well try it.
yeah, I think current base SMRU, right? Like all the mainers that still keep on playing it, they keep on playing it because there's like a lot of viable Pokemon. It allows for a lot of teams expression. So I think SMRU in general are the uh, people that are most welcome to a change because it keeps creativity on, it keeps interest up for the tier. Like, even if someone finds Talonflame probably too broken, I don't think they would actually be opposed to trying it out, is my opinion.
Oh yeah, no, certainly not. And I can confidently say that at least back during RU World Cup, when I was playing, I mean, my team was very much engaged. Well, especially me. So that was probably part of it. But um, whenever I would build and I would ask for people to like discuss with me, there was so much activity, and there was more activity during like the Talon meta in chat than it was when I was just playing regular SM. So I think we would at the very least see like a temporary boost in engagement.
Yeah, I really don't think there's a downside in freeing Talonflame, honestly. If it's too broken, we just ban it back. If it's not, we get something new and cool to play with. Like, I really don't see a reason to not try it out.
Do we have anything else that we want to cover?
I honestly think we said everything. If any of ODR or Sign want to add anything else, this is probably the chance. Otherwise, I think we are kind of done.
Yeah, I think I pretty much said everything I wanted to say.
Yeah,
Okay.
same here.
Okay, perfect then. Um, with that said, I want to thank UEFO, ODR, and Starglim for Cyanize, sorry, for joining the call. Also, Evie that went away earlier, but she also talked a lot about Talonflame. Um, there's a thread right now on Smogon about Talonflame, so if you are listening to this video and want to like comment on something that we said, you are more than welcome on posting there. The more activity we get there, the more likely is that we get some actual actions on Talonflame. So if you have anything to say, please do. And with that said, we're done. You guys can say goodbye and then I'll close the video.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah, goodbye. Thanks for having me.
Bye bye.